Bring in our great friend Steve Leisman, senior economics reporter. He's got some news on Geithner, on stress tests, on Bernanke, and on the American banking system. That's a tall order.
It's a heck of a troika. Geithner, Bernanke, and the banks. The Treasury today, Larry, announcing details of its new bank rescue effort that ultimately could make the government a big shareholder in some of the nation's biggest banks. In an interview this evening with the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer, Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner explained government ownership as a temporary backstop for the banking system.
We want these firms to be able to raise capital in the private markets, but we're providing a sort of a backstop, a form of insurance, to make sure that, again, they're strong enough to get through a more challenging economic environment.
Here's the new plan. The 19 biggest banks will first undergo a stress test that will examine a bank's ability to absorb losses if the economy ends up worse than currently forecast. For example, if unemployment tops 10%. Or house prices fall more than 30%. When the stress test shows banks need capital, the plan offers a way to basically sell the government common stock. Banks can convert the existing preferred shares the government holds from the old TAR plan into new convertible preferred shares, or they can buy new shares. This new preferred can in turn be converted to common as needed. That would give the government direct ownership stakes in the banks. Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke said in Congress today, this is a step short of real nationalization.
A nationalization, to my mind, is when the government seizes the bank, zeroes out the shareholders, and begins to manage and run the bank. And we don't plan anything like that.
The first victim or beneficiary, you take the pick, could be Citigroup, as we're likely to hear tomorrow about a new effort to rescue the bank.
Really? A new effort?
It'll be the third attempt.
Bernanke parsing words here. Look, a straight-out FDIC takeover of a failed bank, that is total nationalization. Right. We know that. On the other hand, if the government owns 40% of the shares of Citibank, that is an effective federal takeover. Is Bernanke parsing words here, blowing smoke at us? Too clever by one, too cute by three?
I don't actually think so, Larry. I think what he's saying is, look, we already have massive control of these banks, either through supervisory authority or our control of the preferred. That, look, this is not a big change from the control we have already. The big question that was unanswered for me today is, will there be government rules for exercise of the voting shares in the common stock once it gets it? I did not get a chance to ask.
And another question is going to be, who's going to run this show? Page 1, Wall Street Journal. Victor Pandit is complaining he may be history. Who's going to run the show? Which regulator do these guys report to? Let me bring in Arthur Laffer. I want to get his take on all this and a few other things. Art Laffer, the head of Laffer Investments, former Reagan advisor, and the co-author of The End of Prosperity. So, Arthur, let's have a quick lay of the land here from your perspectives.
Yeah, what they're doing, Larry, is the government's borrowing all the private capital available in the marketplace. Then they're the only ones left to invest anywhere, and it is effectively a partial nationalization of not only the banks but of the auto industries. It's a catastrophe, and the market's giving a huge thumbs down and raspberry on these policies. I've never seen anything so bad in my life.
What about this issue of the forthcoming Geithner plan, the public-private fund that's going to band together and purchase the toxic assets from the banks? Do you give that any credibility, any efficacy? Will it do any good?
I don't. I really don't. I mean, everyone agrees with stress tests for banks. I mean, that's clear. But banks should do that on their own. And they should worry about their own capital functioning. That's what they should do. It shouldn't be a government function. And how does the government know what it's going to be in unemployment rates, what the sensitivities are here? That's something that on the companies I'm on the boards of, we always do stress testing to see how we can handle bad times. But this is just government coming in and taking it all over, and it's outrageous.
Steve Leisman, outrageous. That's one of my favorite adjectives.
Let me just say I share Arthur's skepticism about the government's ability to do anything here. But, Larry, Arthur, you have $600 billion of excess reserves in the banking system on the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve. It is not as if people are clamoring and lining up out the door for private capital right now. I understand over a long period of time there's a situation where the government could crowd out. But in times when you have the kind of slack you have in the economy, I think it's sort of at least conventional economic wisdom that the government doesn't crowd out when it invests at this time.
It's conventional economics from this administration, Steve. But frankly, that monetary base that they've increased by about 150% in the last 6 months is one of the most dangerous, outrageous things I've seen. It's 10 times the percentage increase ever before in the U.S., and banks are making loans. If you look at the M1 data, Steve, you can see that bank loans are increasing. They're increasing very rapidly.
Across the board.
Across the board over the last 10 years.
Art, I am your student, Art.
It's a breakdown it's the breakdown in the securitized secondary market.
That's what it is. That's exactly what it is.
The banks are actually doing their job. And
but there's no
enough,
velocity, Larry. That's the thing. You can put out there $100 trillion if there's no velocity.
Well, velocity comes later, Steve, and then you're going to get the inflation.
Well,
the velocity will come.
Let's talk about this.
Hold on. Though, at that point.
Let me set the stage. This morning, Arthur, on the call with Melissa Francis and me,
yes.
Steve Leisman and I had a little debate about inflation and the causes of inflation. Steve Leisman, of course, is a great, famous Keynesian Phillips curver. He believes that high unemployment reduces inflation, and low unemployment and strong economic growth raises inflation. On the other hand, I represented the monetary school, which says inflation is caused by too much money chasing too few goods. And Steve, as a throwaway, said with inflation and taxes, he'd like to discuss with Arthur Laffer. So I have delivered the aforementioned
well, I love Steve Leisman. Let me just tell you that, Larry.
Arthur, what is your response to Steve?
He said he likes me, Larry. You just
I do like him.
Actually, we love you. It's not it's love. It's deep-seated love, and I don't even need a stress test to find this love.
The Fed can't pirouette and do this sort of thing, Larry. What they've done with the monetary base is they've set into motion an enormous inflationary pressure in the U.S. economy. With the shrinking of the U.S. economy, and it's shrinking very rapidly, you not only have more money, but you also have fewer goods. That's a classic double whammy on inflation.
Did you not hear that from me this morning, Mr. Leisman?
I heard that
from you. Did I say something that's almost virtually identical and even the same?
You did.
Even the same.
I do not buy the idea that capacity has been so diminished that we have a problem of too few goods. And Art, my whole point is this, is that this idea of too much money, absolutely. Doctrine, absolutely. There must be a transmission mechanism. And when you have high unemployment and you do not have the goods destruction, you maintain globalization, you maintain competition in the economy, then you have no transmission mechanism for that inflation.
You're missing one thing here, if I may interject.
If it's just one, I'm in good shape.
Well, no, unemployment has to do with the real wage in the system here.
Right.
What we're talking about is the price of goods, all goods in terms of money. That has nothing to do with unemployment except for the fact that you get fewer goods. And when you have more money and fewer goods, the amount of dollars per good goes up. It goes up because there are fewer goods, and it goes up because there's more money. And the monetary base is the number you have to look at.
All right, monetary base you have to look at. And probably should have a glance for the use of money from M1 and M2, Arthur.
That's right.
You buy that too. And by the way, more goods would be available to absorb the excess money. So more goods and more growth would be counterinflationary. Is that right, Art?
Yeah, that's exactly right. But then, Larry,
I agree with that.
But then, Larry, the velocity of money is all of a sudden going to start rising. Once you see your inflation starting, Steve, then you'll see the velocity soar and you'll get a Phil Kagan type of hyperinflation.
Can Art at least admit that if the money sits on the balance sheet at the Fed, it is not at that moment inflationary?
It's not sitting on the balance sheet at the Fed, and it is at that moment. That's where money always sits. The question is how much money sits where and under what demand for money.
I got to push down. Last point. Steve Leisman wanted to know this morning, Art, what is the highest marginal tax rate that would really do damage to the economy? And I want to raise this point. Mr. Obama last evening in his speech reaffirmed his intention to roll back the Bush tax cuts. So the 33% tax rate goes to 36 and the 35% tax rate goes to 40. What we learned today, Arthur, is he's going to take steps before the Bush tax cuts expire in 2010. In his current budget to be released tomorrow, he is going to lower the exemption for the upper-end people. In other words, a 35% tax rate payer cannot deduct 35%, for example, of his mortgage interest. He'll only be able to deduct 28%. He'll only be able to deduct 28% from his charitable contributions. Art Laffer, will this hurt the economy? Just the beginning. The lower exemptions and ultimately the higher tax rates.
Well, of course it will hurt the economy, Larry, but I was watching Nancy Pelosi say that the real revenue raisers that they're going to have to come to, and they will have to come to this, are the payroll taxes, consumption taxes, and low-income, middle-income income taxes. Sooner or later, they're going to go to that, and they're going to go really hog wild on raising taxes. And they're going to do it, Steve, and it's not going to be very far out in the future.
All right, Steve, last word. Go ahead.
I agree. If that happens, that's terrible. But my only point that I had, Art, was this. Is that there is no Taylor rule for the great concept of the Laffer curve. So my point is that it is impossible to know where we are on the Laffer curve at any one point in time, such that a 2 or 3% rise in the tax rate may have little effect or a huge effect.
All right, Art, last word real quick. Art, last word.
But so what? I mean, we're not after which tax rates raise revenues. We're after which tax rates hurt the economy, hurt output, hurt employment, and cause inflation. And those tax rates are continuous across the whole range, and they're getting worse and worse and worse every day, Steve. All right. It's frightening.
All right, we got to hang on. Thank you, Steve Leisman. Well done.
Thank you for the opportunity
to question
Art Laffer.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Art.
That was great stuff.